I decided to put this statement up here because there was an occasion a couple of years ago at the Green Gathering where I cleared a dome of half the people in the first 2 minutes with the statements that I made. Right, and I was a bit upset, but the people who stayed afterwards were extremely grateful for the information I shared with them, and we did have a good session. And later I read that Yoko Ono here, she never felt that any of her performances were successful unless most of the audience left before the end in outrage. So that was some comfort, but I don't want everybody to leave here because it would be really embarrassing. So I'm going to give you a special sign, and it's going to help me too, that when I'm going to try and make this sign, whenever I can feel I'm going to make a statement that's very, very challenging, I'm going to make this sign, and this is a warning to let your mind move out of the way, your preconceptions move out of the way for a few moments, to allow some kind of emergency vehicle through to offer something that might be vital information. It might not be, it might be helpful, it might not, but at least allow it through for consideration. Now, I might forget to make the sign, so if you can feel those controversial statements coming on, if you feel the urge to rush from the hall, please ask you not to. Just please feel free to make the sign, and I'm going to really enjoy that participation if you feel, because I think this is all about, this whole process that we're going through is about reclaiming our lives and becoming active. And I think that's why I love pantomimes, because it's not just the audience asked to participate. I can't take questions while I'm talking, but I will appreciate this sign. You can make that if you want, don't mind. Now, obviously, if the right questions had already been asked and answered, none of us would be sitting here today to find out more about what might be going on. I find it very interesting that I'm the only female speaker speaking over the weekend. I know very, very clearly that's nothing to do with any sexism on the part of the organisers. That's very, very obvious. It's the way that our culture works. And the fact that the position that women are put in and put themselves in, and that children are in, and tribal minorities are in, animals are in, and so forth, and the global conspiracy, to me, are all symptomatic of the same syndrome, and it's all to do, in my view, with the state of mind that we're in. Now, there might be all kinds of entities and evil beings manipulating us. I think that's very, very likely and possible, but we couldn't be manipulated if we were fully switched on and if we were fully conscious. I think it's taken for granted that most of our perceptions are unconscious. That is understood. We are to understand that if all our perceptions became conscious, that we will be utterly overwhelmed. So why on earth is that so? Isn't that something we should question? Maybe we have the faculties within us to be more conscious, and this is only a temporary situation that we can't handle it. If we were more aware in every moment of all the energies coming to us and all the possibilities of the ways that we could act, I think we would live our lives very, very differently. I'm very grateful to Ian for giving me a slot here today. I'm not a professional. I don't have qualifications in what I do. There are no qualifications in what I do. I do have some sort of academic background, but most of my life has been as a mother, been a mother for 20 years. And what I've always wanted to know is what will make me happy and what will make my children happy. And those, to me, seem the most important questions behind all of this. And I apologise for laughing quite loudly in some of the presentations. I know it's very, very serious information that we're dealing with, but I do have appreciated the humour of some of the speakers because they lift us out of that reactive, critical, it's all so serious, what's going to happen mode into this, laughter moves us into this other state where we're free. For that moment, we are free, and at the end of a laugh, we are free. And we're in touch with the infinite consciousness that David Icke kept talking about last night. I was shocked when I realised the extent of the global conspiracy. I'd known all my life that something wasn't quite right around here, couldn't quite put a finger on it, could smell a rat, something's not right, But when I realised the extent of the global conspiracy about 3 years ago and saw the extent of the chemtrailing, and I couldn't escape it because the planes are going to my house and they're making a mess of the sky, and I can't relax and look at the blue skies, and I thought I was going to emigrate, but I realised it's going on all over the world. I was shocked and horrified, and I went into a state of grief and shock for months, actually, and it felt like it would never end, and I just kept holding the feeling in my body. And eventually it did pass. And I think with all these grieving processes, all these adjustment processes, we can adapt to the new reality and we can become strong in it. And since then, it has never scared me. I was very, very scared for a few months, but now I never feel scared. And I know that we are powerful enough to deal with anything that has thrown us. And it actually doesn't matter, because at the end of the day, we're all immortal souls, and this is just a very small part of our experience. Hey. So the question is, how did we get into this state, and where do we want to go to, and what are the practical things we can do to help bring it about? And I was so pleased to see what Jeff ended with just then, talking about the near-death experiences and this description of the kind of qualities we might be looking towards in, possibly in 2012 or that time, or it's projected, because they're the kind of qualities that I think are available to us now, somewhere locked into our brains. They exist now. We can't consciously access them. That's all. And I think part of the attraction of the kind of end time theories and the 2012 idea is because part of us, we do actually long for an end to all this. We long for an end of the suffering and the worries and the fears, and we can sense that there is a greater, more glorious sense of consciousness that we can experience. And so although we might be frightened to think of things changing, and part of us really, really wants it. So I'm going to ask who we are. I'm going to have a look at the left and the right brains. I'm going to talk about the significance of natural food, and expand the concepts of nutrition to understand that it's all the energies and all the ideas that come at us. I'm going to look at the current full-scale attack that's happening to our brains now, and how we can turn this feedback loop back, the one that where we're having all these negative influences coming at us, and that's affecting what we are and then what we in turn create. At the moment it's negative, we can switch that round into a positive one and recreate the paradise that we've sometimes been told is out of this life or somewhere else, but actually is within our own skulls, and that's how we can be aware of it. And talk about the kind of paradigm shift I think we need. So my question through most of my adult life is, well, what will truly make me happy? I tried the usual things that we all think will work, and they didn't quite hit the spot. One of my first major alerts that we might have been sort of fed a story about what we are is when I had my first child. And this baby that I held in my arms just wasn't what I had been told by all the baby care books and by all the people who told me all about what it was like having a baby. This wasn't the baby I'd been told about. And I think a lot of mothers have this experience. This is a common experience. And I just, what's going on? I remember now holding him. And it was strange because I felt like he should be able to talk to me, but he couldn't. But it was, in a way, he was. He was an exceptionally alert baby, but I don't think he was fundamentally different to any other human being. I think he just made himself very, very clear. It was just his character. And he made it very clear he wanted to be close to me all the time, to feed whenever he wanted, and go everywhere with me, and be out and about and part of the action. And that was the way I had to bring him up. And, I mean, this seems really obvious to me now, but I'd come from a culture where I thought, oh, just babies go in cots and they're fed every so often, you get on with something else. I just didn't have a clue. But that's the cultural conditioning we come from in the West. And I found out very soon that in tribal societies, this way of bringing up children is considered normal, to keep the child close and the child is part of things, because they haven't made their environment and their culture alien to a young child. So the question is, what kind of culture is it where we cannot welcome a child, where they have to be sidelined until they've been suitably conditioned so they can join and create more of this? I'm really glad that things have reached such a point now that it's become obvious that what we've created isn't working for us. When it was just kind of mediocre suffering, we were going to carry on with it. Now there's more and more people asking more and more questions. I went on through my adult life looking for more and more answers to what would really make me feel happy. And of course, as we know, it's not the things that we're told. And I came to realize, of course, it's a feeling rather than external things. And yet there are some external energetic things that do affect us, but they're not to do with achievement or what people think of you. They are energetic. Eventually, this took me to the point of raw food in 2001. And I read something written by an American raw food expert, David Wolfe. And he explained from his experience, he said, when you eat only raw food, something happens to your consciousness. Everything's different, and he couldn't explain, but it was all different. At that time, I was feeling very, very stuck in my life, and I was stuck in situations that weren't serving me. But why can't I shift? So I thought, I've got to give this a go, and I thought, oh no, I've got to give up cheese on toast every lunchtime, and I've got to give up my cups of tea. What am I going to do? What am I going to do? I can't do that. I thought, cheese on toast and cups of tea, or chance to shift to a high vibration. It is a really difficult choice that people face. So, obviously, within the week, I decided to go for it. And it was true, within 3 days, food takes 72 hours to completely pass out the system. So within 3 days, the last bit of cooked food had gone. I slipped into what, at the time, relatively felt like a paradise consciousness. It reminded me of how I felt as a young child in my parents' garden. But, why haven't we been told about this before? This is all completely news. I've just read it on some new obscure website. What's going on? This is real. And so, obviously, I kept this up, but I did have nutritional problems because I didn't have all the information that I needed to make it work. That was 7 years ago. Now I've been stably and happily on raw food I've been raw for 7 years, but stable with it for 3 years, and I found out a lot of information that's made it work. Some of the early information it's come from places like California, and in that sunny climate, your metabolism works quite a lot differently. So one of my sort of missions is to spread information about eating raw food in a way that will work for people, especially in this country, so that it can get these kind of benefits. But in the course of my search for more information about how to make all the raw food work and still satisfy me nutritionally while still having this wonderful feeling in my head, I came across the work of somebody called Tony Wright, and which I found it resonated with it immediately. And the reason is while I'd been raw, I'd noticed I needed much less sleep. And my sleep needs have fallen quite dramatically. Ian mentioned in my blog posting at 3 in the morning. I was up at 2:30 this morning. I went to bed at 10:30, and I woke up at 2:30, and I was ready to get up. Don't do that every night. Sometimes I might sleep longer, sometimes I might sleep less. But this is not, I was an 8 to 9 hour person. And then I don't feel tired. Also, I started to notice when I was first raw, and I still experience this, that when I stay up late and miss sleep, I start to go into these very creative, inspired states, the kind of subliminal states, where, you just know everything's okay and you feel in communion, like divine communion. And I just, what's going on? I couldn't find an explanation for what could be going on here. All I'd heard, this is a common experience among people eating high raw food diets, especially completely raw. So I came across the work of Tony Wright. His description of what happens, he says that the right side of the brain, for most of us now, is starved. It needs undamaged amino acids, it needs undamaged fatty acids, and it needs fruit compounds. Undamaged. Undamaged means uncooked. Now this is a big, I'm saying cooking damages food. It seems to be a very, very challenging statement to people because it's what we've done all our lives. It's questioning everything we are and everything we're doing and all our source of comfort. What would we do without that? It's so fundamental. It's going to get worse, sorry. But he's saying that raw food nourishes the right side of the brain. The moment it's starved, the left side of the brain can basically live on junk. It has a different type of structure. So we can still think, and we can still do maths and all those kind of things, and we can still have language and still speak while we're not nutritionally properly nourished. But if we want to have our creative faculties, and if we want to feel inspired, intuitive, to the level that we could be, we're going to have to get some undamaged nutrition in there to feed that very much more complex brain. And he described how the left brain needs much, much more sleep than the right brain, so that if you're on raw food, nourishing the right side of the brain, and then you miss some sleep, so the left side gets tired, the right brain can really start to kick in. So everything, it all fitted in with what I'd experienced. Plus, I learned a lot about nutrition from him, which I'll come back to later, which enabled me to make raw food work. Now, he actually has something very controversial to say, and I think it's agreed now that we're a left brain dominated society, and we all need to move over to a right brain. That isn't controversial. What he basically proposes is the left brain's a dead donger. It's malfunctioning. There's something seriously wrong with it. It's creating havoc. I'm going to come back to that later. I'm going to come back to that in a minute, actually. But the other thing he suggests is that what we call psychoactive drugs or shamanic medicines, and even a lot of recreational drugs, the chemical drugs, a lot of them work by stimulating the right side of the brain. So they're enabling to access parts of our brain and consciousness that, because we become left brain dominated and because our right brains are starved, we don't normally have access to. Of course, when you use substances in large volumes that you're not used to, it can all get out of hand, and it can seem like a peak experience that you can't maintain, that you couldn't be functional in. But nevertheless, we're showing that those states of consciousness are accessible from our brains. It's not the drugs, it's something in here that's being accessed. Now, I did something which I'm not recommending anybody does at home, but I'm going to have to report on one of my research projects and have to, obviously make it clear that everybody's responsible for what they do, and that if you start experimenting with your brain, there can be unexpected consequences. But something I've done repeatedly is a kind of using very, very powerful shamanic tools is a combination of sleep deprivation, small amounts of ayahuasca, all based on a very, very high quality raw food diet. And I've had numerous experiences of accessing the state of consciousness where I feel awake in a way that I'm not awake now, and I don't think anyone is awake normally. And I've just known, this is it. This is what being awake is. This is what the mystics are talking about. This is not about being a saintly or good person. This is biochemistry. This is energetic. And this is where we were born to be like this. We were born to be high, but in a functional, grounded way. This is kind of, you could say it's our birthright. And this dumbed down state, we don't, and these are just glimpses. I've only had tiny glimpses that in our ultimate state, our level of perception and our sense of connectedness to everybody and everything in the whole universe would be at a level that we now only associate with, massive shamanic ayahuasca experiences or near-death experiences or something. But we could have access to a version of that ongoingly, where we basically live at genius level in a state of bliss. Now, it might sound far-fetched, but it seems we have the machinery in there now to do that now, if we could find out how to restore it. And I found that it's not something we can, at the present moment, it's not something that we can maintain on a day-to-day basis. I've not found I can. But we can make slight movement towards it. We can feel better now. And this is what I found over the last few years, that how I feel, my state of consciousness is so much better than it was years ago. And it's really just down to food and lifestyle. There are some people who naturally have more spiritual awareness. Somehow the machinery is working better. They feel enormous sense, expanded consciousness, and they feel this enormous love for everybody. And they just think, they tell the rest of us, all we just got to do, I think David Icke's an example of this. I think he's naturally massively fired up, say, look, we've just got to feel infinite consciousness, come on, I think, well, I don't know, I'll try, And a lot of the spiritual teachers have been like that. But it's as helpful often to the rest of us as a cheetah telling a tortoise to run faster. All you've got to do is run faster. But for us to feel that level of love and connection, we actually have to be able to feel more, which means that we need to restore the chemistry of the right brain, because the right brain is the one that feels. So I'll talk a little bit about left and right brain research. It was only, and I couldn't believe this when I found this, it was only in the 1960s that it was experimentally confirmed that there was a difference in function between the left and right hemispheres. It has been suspected since the 19th century from evidence from head injuries. But this guy called Roger Sperry, he did some research with people who had the corpus callosum, the bridge between left and right brain, who'd had that severed, and they'd had that done as a cure for epilepsy, because in the 1960s that was the only cure for some types of epilepsy. It'd be very interesting to Google this and see exactly the experiments. It would take too long for me to explain it now, but the conclusion was that language, for most people, is based in the left brain. That the right brain, the left brain can't make pictures, and it doesn't really quite know what it's doing. The right brain's not very good with language, except simple nouns, but it can make pictures, and it can act. It can do things. It just can't explain them. So now that's only sort of 40 or so years ago. So, and we've got Michael Persinger in the 1980s. He found that by stimulating certain areas of the right hemisphere, you could bring on spiritual or religious experiences. the type of experience was dictated by the person's belief system. So for a person who's Christian, they see images of Jesus and so forth, or the Buddhist would see images of the Buddha, but the feeling they were describing was the same. His interpretation, he explained this, that the feeling was the same, but the left brain would interpret that experience depending on the belief system, because the belief system is held by the left brain. Then we've got Alan Snyder in Australia, and he's working on this now. He's been experimenting by using a magnetic field to temporarily take out the influence of the left hemisphere. In those circumstances, ordinary people just experience savant skills like amazing drawing abilities that they don't normally have, or they can count huge numbers of dots on a page, or do complex mathematical problems. And this is something that's been seen in some autistic people before, the autistic savants, that ones who've had damage to the left brain, or people with damage to the left brain, they sometimes have these special abilities. And then we've got Jill Bolt-Taylor. Hopefully everyone heard David Icke describe that yesterday, her experience. She had a stroke to the left hemisphere, and while that was happening, she experienced a loss of separateness and this kind of the mystical experience. So Ramachandran, he's a brain scientist who works with people who've had strokes in California. In 58% of cases of people who have a stroke to the right side of the brain, they are in denial that it's ever happened, and they actually don't know that they've had a stroke. So they'll be asked, say, in experiments to, please would you, pick up this object, and they'll say, well, I've already done it, I'm doing it, and they're not. Or, or they say, well, I can't now, I've got arthritis, so I don't feel like it. Any sort of ridiculous excuse is why they can't move the left side of the body, because, of course, if you had a stroke to the right side of the brain, you can't move the left side of your body, but they don't even know that it's happened in 58% of cases. When people have a stroke to the left hemisphere, this hardly ever happens. So it's sort of an interesting picture to look at, because the confabulation is a name for that lying when people don't know that they're lying. There's an article in the New Scientist, October 2006, suggesting that we all confabulate, and I think I agree with that. So why is it that everybody we know says things that we just don't add up? We're the only person in our lives where it all kind of adds up to us, but that other people are always, not quite sure that they agree with us. So how can this come about? Some of us must be getting it wrong, and yet we do believe our official versions of events. The constant disagreements with how people remember things, eyewitness accounts, are unreliable, because we believe the stories in our own heads, and that may not be true, but to us they're very, very real. And the left brain is dominant. So we've got a situation where the right brain has this wider sense of connection. You take out the left brain for a bit, and we've got all these extra abilities, and this loss of sense of separation. People who lose their right brain seem to lose a sense of reality, and we've got the left brain in charge. So I just leave that for pondering. So I guess most people know the kind of thing left and right hemispheres are about. The left brain is about linear thoughts, whereas the right brain is a sort of multi-dimensional processor. Left brain likes to have things in tidy boxes, so it knows where they are for easy finding, whereas the right brain just does its own thing by intuitive awareness, and it can feel in an energetic way, and also it's very sensitive in a physical way as well. Left brain is, because it's so limited, it's sort of totally always generating a sense of fear, because it doesn't really know what's going on, and it seems to be where the machinery of the ego is. It just thinks the same conditioned thoughts round and round again until occasionally something so big and so massive comes along that eventually it's forced to update its reality. Maybe like the global conspiracy. Think, hang on, we just keep at it, or same belief systems doing the same things until this thing gets so big, the elephant gets so big that it's just, right, no, we've really got to update. But then it tends to just take on another belief system to explain everything, go around those same conditioned thoughts about that belief system again and again and again. Whereas the right brain operates in real time. It's responding to real energies. It detects energies, it detects what's happening, and it has a desire to respond immediately. Something's not nice, it moves away. It doesn't stay there for more, thinking the same conditioned thoughts about it. It gets on with something different. And so I think this understanding is crucial to the situation that we're in the world, because I think the response is to detect what we don't like and move on to something different, rather than thinking more and more thoughts and generating more and more theories about it. So the left brain always leaves us in a state of dissatisfaction because of its dysfunctionality, and it's completely confused and overwhelmed by if it has too much input. Or, for example, the right brain gets very, very fired up. For example, this is why, you know, the sort of things like ayahuasca experiences can be so terrifying for people, because it's just totally overwhelming to the logical mind. Now, I think David Eitzer is spot on about lots of what he says about right and left brain. The only thing that I would sort of question is, my guess is that the right brain actually runs the body better. I think it has better body consciousness. I think it has better out there consciousness, but I think it also runs the body better. And the more things I've done to access the right side of my brain more, I feel the better that my body is run. It's better for the immune system, better for the digestive system. And I think the right brain probably corresponds to what the spiritual traditions call higher self, and the left brain to more to lower self. It seems that's a problem with our pineal gland. Well, I was just going to say about left and right brain, even if we are very, very, we're not, I mean, this is all very, very speculative. It just needs more research. You can't really draw any conclusions at this stage. But it is accepted that we need to get more into our right brain, so we can just work with that for the moment. We're not, you know, obviously we're not going to hack our left brains out anyway, so it's going to carry on, you know, but perhaps just get it, our thought process is to calm down and take them a little bit less seriously and get more into sort of an energetic awareness. And that's all we can do right for the moment anyway. There is something that's very definite that's happened in humans, and that's that the pineal gland, over the course of human history, has become smaller and calcified. And this happens also over the course of our lives. It calcifies. It starts, but you know, especially, and this accelerates at puberty. And the pineal gland is very, very important. It runs the endocrine system. It's responsible for the hormones that go around the body, including important brain hormones like melatonin and pinoline. Also, DMT. Now, DMT, in our current state, is only put out by the pineal gland in peak experiences, or birth, or death, or near-death experiences, or possibly in childbirth, in a natural childbirth. And it's responsible for us accessing a much higher state of consciousness. Long ago in human history, the pineal gland pumped DMT all the time. It wouldn't have been a massive blast like people smoking DMT today or taking large amounts of ayahuasca. It would have been a small amount, just like we have serotonin pumping around and dopamine pumping around. It's just a neurotransmitter, and arguably necessary for full human function. But now the pineal gland doesn't pump it. Also, we don't pump enough melatonin, which is why one of the reasons we tend to be in an agitated state. It's possible that early in human development, that we had a diet was very, very high in fruit, and we ate a lot of fruit, which contained steroid inhibitors, which allowed our pineal gland to expand and to pump out more hormones. And this affected the way we developed in our mother's wombs and allowed our brain to increase in size and the pineal gland to pump out even more hormones. And we got into this kind of positive feedback loop, which enabled us to be human beings that are have so much more capability than potentially than the animals. And I think human beings are sort of getting themselves a bad reputation in their own eyes at the moment, and we've come to sort of view human beings as parasites. But I think in the form we once were and the form we can be again, we're as useful to the earth as the birds and the bees and the butterflies. We have a very, very special role to play. It's just, the problem is that it's just that we're not playing it now because we've just gone off at a tangent. But the point about the hormones is it affects the way the DNA is read. You don't actually have to change DNA to change the form of an animal or human. You can do it by just changing the way the DNA is read. For example, we have the same DNA as when we were very young. It might have mutated slightly, but the main reason we grow older is to do with hormones. It's not to do with the DNA changing. We can still pass on that DNA to children. So that's just a diagram of the pineal loop changing over time. At first, our pineal glands expanded, and then due to probably a change in our environments and a change in our diets, that the positive feedback loop reversed, and our brains started to shrink. And it's well established scientifically that our brains have been shrinking for a long, long, long time. And that's accelerated since the start of agriculture and introduction of cereals. And that the pineal gland has been shrinking. This is not, I mean, this isn't controversial. This is sort of hard science. And as in recent years, that this has accelerated, and it's now accelerating very fast because we seem to be having an attack on our pineals. The new additives and the new energies that are coming towards us now seem to particularly affect our pineal glands. So we're going to a severely degenerative loop as humanity as a whole. So I'm going to point out something very obvious, the feedback loop between what we are and the world that we create, or if we're not creating and we're unconscious, it gets created for us, and then that produces whatever comes back into us. The obvious thing is food, but all the other energies, and that makes us what we are. I sort of feel funny even putting this up, but sometimes I get a feeling that we're not quite clear about this from the way we behave. So what has happened? Why aren't we eating undamaged food? You know, what's going on? One possibility is that if we were supposing, it's a possibility that we originally lived in a kind of tropical forest environment, at least an environment very rich, just where there was trees growing, we could eat whatever fruit we wanted. Food was freely abundant to us. And there was some kind of disaster. It could have been ecological catastrophe. It could have been interference from outside the planet. You know, I try not to get too involved in arguments about that because it can go on forever. The point is something, as far as I can tell, happened, and our brains got either meddled with or something happened about the food we ate that they changed. And we had to, when we were no longer living in an environment where we could get the food that was natural to us for whatever reason, there are a lot of foods that we can eat if we cook them. They're not, I would say, nearly all vegetables and fruit you can eat raw, but some of them, when people go raw, they don't want to carry on eating them very long. For example, the pulses, because they're not really our ideal food, and they contain small amounts of toxins that are destroyed on cooking. So maybe at that time it was a smart move for us to do. And then about 12,000 years ago, we had agriculture coming in, and I don't know why that started, and there's probably a story behind that. And now we have this idea that the bulk of our diet should be grains, and this is what's put out to us. I mean, I'll just cut off that bottom bit, and fruit and vegetables, nuts and seeds, small amount of animal produce. I'm going to come back to that, what we found works for us. But this whole, and it's interesting at the moment, these grain shortages we've got worldwide and the rice shortages, the thing is, this has come about because the way agriculture is organised. If we're eating a wide variety of fruit and vegetables and nuts and seeds, you don't really get failed harvests in the same way. It's because grains they're dependent, especially wheat is very dependent on humans to propagate. Grass seeds just spread in the wind, but wheat seeds just drop where they land. It takes humans to get that organised, and it's a lot of work, and it's all to do with the work ethic, the idea that we've all got to work very hard. At this time, we do have to work hard, and if we have the changes we need on the planet, I do think there's a benefit to hard work, but ultimately, I don't think that we really have to, it's not really natural to us to work the level that we think we have to now. And then we all know about chemical farming coming in after the Second World War. That's obviously bad. And then we reached junk food, and now we're getting to a level where it's a blatant attack. And now even people who are not sure about whether what you eat matters can see that putting neurotoxins like aspartame and MSG in foods is just really not a good idea, and is actually, so our food is an active attack on us now, unless we make conscious choices otherwise. But the interesting thing is that either each stage, what we eat affects our brain function, so that allows the next change to come in, because we get so stupid that we think it's all right. We're not really stupid, we become less energetically aware. We can't tell that this isn't good food. Something interesting I've noticed while I've been raw is I've got to the point now where I can almost taste food at a distance. I know instinctively exactly which piece of fruit or which leaf I want to eat. And I think that's, again, it's just a little glimpse of what's possible. We've lost our intuition, and we've been hypnotized to think that this processed crap that's fed at us is food. Just like David Icke was talking about the potato and the apple, this person could be hypnotized to thinking a potato is an apple. Well, we think what's served up to us is food. It's not. It's just a pile of chemicals that our body doesn't recognize. Thank you. So, significance of raw food. Well, as I said, it's undamaged. We've been fed a story of nutrition as these building blocks that we just sort of shove in, as if like, you know, you're just building a Lego model. Obviously, it's just got a load of nonsense. I mean, food contains, so a bit of data talked about, it contains information. You know, we're not expected to be able to read a copy of War and Peace that's been left in the car park and drenched and half burned. Our bodies, it's a miracle, it's a testament to how marvellous our bodies are, that they can take in all this stuff and extract some nutrition from it and keep us going for years and years. And in a lot of cases, people can be very happy and healthy like that. I wasn't happy on cooked food. A lot of people like me who had, you know, were sometimes happy, sometimes not happy, have found that they can more consistently feel happy on a raw food diet. But it's just a testament to the human body that it can actually extract the nutrition from this damaged food. But it takes a lot of energy to do that, and I still think there's a price to pay, and we're not living to our full potential for health and happiness. Well, this convinces some people. A curling image of a fig cut in half, and there on the other side you can see curling images of raw cabbage and cooked cabbage, raw corn and cooked corn. So, not convinced by the arguments, it's always worth giving it a go. And the benefits that are experienced by a lot of people, and I've experienced all these myself, is this massive increase in energy. There's more time in the day. I mean, I can't believe anybody could not want more time in the day. I mean, it's just so, it made that my first two children, I wasn't raw, and I just seemed like I never had any free time. With my second set of two children, being raw, it means I can put them to bed, and I can be up half the night doing stuff on my own, and then have another day, have a day with them. It's like having a day on my own. Not every night, but it can be done, and the increase in quality of life is so amazing. And just feeling better, you can't quantify that. You just feel better. Chronic conditions clear up. I'm not into listing masses of diseases. It's not my speciality. The examples are diabetes and asthma. And I don't want to list conditions because you can't make promises, but surprising things can happen for people, and things that you wouldn't have expected. Skin gets better, glowing eyes and skin. People tend to go towards their ideal weight. They feel calmer, more contented, especially children. That's very, very noticeable. Mentally clearer, more intuitive, more creative, more inspired. And deepening connections with our surroundings, with people and with nature, just being more sensitive to energies, because we've taken out all this gunk out of our system, so we're opened up, and also we're feeding the right side of the brain that facilitates these connections. And I mean, sometimes to feel the wind on my skin can feel ecstatic. Honestly, I'm not kidding you. Sometimes when I hear birds sing or I watch the sun come up, it's like being stroked in the inside of my head. And I'm guessing that's the pineal gland. I'm not sure. But I think this is how we're meant to live. This is how we could live. We can live in ecstatic connection with everything on this planet. That is a potential for us now. And that's why we sense intuitively that life could be very, very simple, and we could be happy with very little. And achievements and competitions would mean nothing if you're living that state all the time. And this is not a pipe dream. We can move some way towards it now, not all the way, because we're living in a very, very stressful world that's tending to obliterate some of the bird song. And it's also, we don't know enough to do everything we need to get our brains restored to the full level it could be at, but we can still make a start. And also food tastes nice. It's surprising. You think, oh, I'm just going to have to eat salad. But actually, one thing is salad starts to taste nicer. But also, you just can do all these amazing recipes, and the food is so much more vibrant. You start to notice it's much more of a sensual experience than just sort of satisfying addiction. You don't get hungry in the same way. You don't get all sort of faint and dizzy like I've got to have a meal. It's more like, oh, my energy's going down a bit. You know, I sense perhaps I could do with a bit of this, that, and the other, but it's not really urgent, but sometimes soonish. Scientific research on raw food. I've got to say a long word, leukocytosis. This is when you eat cooked. It's been found that when you eat cooked food, normally people eat, white blood cells rush to the digestive system like it's under attack. And this was considered normal. It was called digestive leukocytosis until it was discovered that when people eat raw food, this doesn't happen. So cooked food is actually perceived as an attack on the system. And famous Pottinger's cats, there's a story behind it, but that's not important. The important thing is this guy had two sets of cats. One he fed raw meat and raw milk. One he fed cooked milk and cooked meat. The ones that were fed the raw milk and raw meat, they were happy and healthy and so forth. The ones that were fed the cooked milk and the cooked meat, the first generation got ill at the end of their life, got degenerative disease at the end of life. The second generation started to get ill and degenerative disease in the middle of their lives. The third generation got ill and got degenerative diseases at the beginning of their lives. And there was no fourth generation. They didn't reproduce. This is sounding like something that's going on with humans today. There's a saying that you can only have 3 generations in a town, and actually most of us haven't had many generations in town. For most of us, it wasn't that many generations ago. They'd lived in the countryside and ate a lot of fresh food. If there wasn't much money about, you picked it from the hedgerow. It's the obvious thing to do. So this sort of cooked process thing hasn't been going on really to the level it does today for very long. Weston Price was a famous nutritionist who looked at, who's a dentist, and he made a link between nutrition and the jaw and the dental arch, and he noticed that when sort of traditional tribal societies moved from their traditional diet to a modern Western diet, their jaw shrunk and their dental arch shrunk, and that's why we can't fit all a lot of us can't fit all our teeth in, and they're all cramped up, and we have to have wisdom teeth out. Now, raw food hasn't cured that for me. My jaw was already made, but the point is that when these societies who ate a diet that was very, very rich in fruit and vegetables and nuts and seeds, not too much grain, a very small amount of meat, when they switched then to a processed diet, they got all the degenerative diseases that we see today, which they hadn't had before. And then Leslie Kenton, she's a sort of modern raw foodist who's looked into how countless people have recovered from illness and improved their health through moving over to a high percentage of raw diet. And I'm just saying, don't believe all this, just do your own research. It's fun, try it and see, And I just really do think this is the food of the future, because when people find out how amazing it makes you feel, if they're given the information to actually make it work enjoyably, and at the moment it's still basically very experimental because people will only be doing it a few decades to the level they are now, I just think it's going to be irresistible, even just for the pleasure that people experience from existing in a body that's been fed healthy, living food. I just had this thought a couple of weeks ago when I was walking down a country lane locally. I was trying to think, but what is it really about raw food? I said, why is it that when I walk down a country lane, and I'm totally connected to nature, I have no fears, and I'm just not afraid of anything, and I just feel totally connected to everything that there is. And how could anything harm me? Because I'm immortal, because I'm part of this. This body will die and this ego will die, but it's not really going to make a massive difference. And then I come home to my house in the town down the road, and it's all bills and deadlines and stress, and and I do admit, although raw food makes me feel better, I'm not immune to stress. It doesn't make things perfect. I'm not going to make that claim. So so I think, but before I was raw, I didn't have that level of connection when I went into the countryside. So I thought, what's going on there? It feels like cooked food is blocking things up somewhere, but also artificial environments blocking us off somewhere. So what's going on? And I sort of started to think about a concept I sort of heard about, I think it was about a year and a half ago now, from going to a talk by a guy called Dan Winter. And I find it very interesting. He's one of the few people at Google have completely censored. So I thought, he's obviously onto something. And he talks a lot about, you can't Google Dan Winter. You can go to his website, www.goldenmean.info. And he talks about how life, I mean, this is not a new idea, but he's just very good at, he's done a lot of work with it, that life is all fractal. For example, an obvious thing is a fern. Each piece of the fern has basically the same structure as the whole fern, and each piece of that has the same structure too. And it's linked to the golden mean. The ratio of the length of that rectangle to the width, to the depth of it, is in the golden mean, which is 1.6 something or other. And if you take a square out, the remaining rectangle on the right-hand side is exactly the same proportion. And if you keep taking squares out, you're still left with a rectangle of the same proportion. And nature tends to form patterns like that, based on the golden mean. And what fractality means is if you take a small piece of the whole, it's got the same structure as the bigger piece, and so it goes down right to to a very, very small level. So the small bit contains the information of the whole. So if everything in us and our bodies are getting to a fractal state, and our environment's in a fractal state, that gives us, this is a vague idea, but I've got a sense of it, that it leads us some kind of connection to the whole, so we can have our sense of being part of the whole, of beingness, of infinite consciousness. What humans have learnt to do, they've learnt to create in a non-fractal way. So, for example, with a motor car, for example, in our bodies, each cell contains the DNA, which has the information for the whole body. So you might have a cell in the liver, but in the DNA in that cell, it's got the information about our hair colour and our eye colour and our leg length and all that kind of stuff. So, but we humans have learned to create in a non-fractal way. So, for example, in a motor car, if you take the steering wheel, it hasn't got all the information that you need to build the whole car. If you take it down to the atomic level, probably each atom has got the information about the whole universe, but there's some sort of discontinuity that we humans have managed to create, and that makes us feel disconnected. And because we are disconnected, so I'm wondering, it was just a question that rose in my mind, has the left brain lost its sense of, has it lost its fractal connection while the right brain has kept it? If we go into a feeling state, does that enable us to create fractally? Whereas if we create with our minds, do we create in this disconnected state? It's just a sort of an idea about that. But it's interesting, I was saying about the atoms of the car, but humans now, we even have to meddle at the atomic level. We have to change the nucleus of an atom. So we have non-fractality even at an atomic level, which is why nuclear, the radioactive isotopes that we're producing are so deadly, because they are deadly. They're not of life. They're not fractal. They're not of life. Life increases natural order, whereas without life, we have entropy, an increase in disorder. And this is all the chaos thing that all ties up to the Illuminati chaos, and it's deadly. But the whole is stronger than the part. If you connect to the whole, obviously it stands to reason, self-evident that it's going to be stronger than if you're off on your own little thing. And anything that wants to interfere with the whole is eventually going to be, it's all going to be brought back. For example, if you a city is abandoned, eventually a forest is going to grow over it. The dandelions keep growing between the paving stones. They're not worried about whether they're going to be trampled down. They do it for the joy of it, because the real ecstatic joy we have is making that connection to the whole without worrying about the consequences. We do it just because it's a nice thing to do. And it's a lovely quote somebody sent recently that I put on my blog, and they said, if the world was going to end tomorrow, I would still plant an apple tree today. And I just know so what he means. As we plant fruit trees, every home we live, and we're always moving house, we just keep planting them because it's just a nice thing to do. I mean, this is I think, I wonder which speaker was it, I think it might have been David Icke who mentioned this, just not think of the consequences. We do what feels right to us now. And then we're already out of it. We're already connecting to the solution. We're already connecting to the vision of what could be. And we're already halfway there. So we're not really waiting for it all to be done for us. Obviously, I mean, I think people know this now, that food is obviously, it's food, water and air. It's also the light frequencies and colour and all the sounds and the smells and taste and touch. It's electromagnetic vibrations and other energetic vibrations. It's the ideas and the creative visions that we hold. And we need to be aware of what we expose ourselves to, and whether it really makes us feel good. And I think that's the simplest question to ask. There's a lot of knowledge that's coming out about nutrition, and it's so helpful because it gives us ideas and pointers of things that we can try. But the final test has to be, how does this make me feel? How does it make me feel now? How does it make me feel tomorrow? And we're under a serious, I think we're in a really, really, really serious attack now. And I think the more I find out about how the human body works and what we need, the more obvious it is we're getting the exact opposite. And it's interesting that a lot of things happening now seem to have the most major impact on the pineal gland. I don't by no means have all the answers. I just find it very interesting that the pineal gland was already shut down by whatever means, whether it was by intervention or it's just something that happened. Our pineal glands were already shut down and underproducing melatonin and stopped producing DMT. Now they're under further attack. And the more we're shut down, obviously, the less we can understand that we can actually feel that we're being shut down and be energetically aware of what things are doing it to us. And it's based on an occult understanding by a minority at work in this world, and they understand that nutrition is codes that allow us to perceive and operate at different levels. And meanwhile, we're fed all this blooming programming about, oh, it's all spiritual, or it's not, material things isn't what it's all about. And so off we go into what I call left brain spirituality, which is ideas about spirituality rather than the energetic experience. Okay. But experience tells us otherwise, that if we want to feel these great things, then we actually have to make an energetic change. And there is a bubbling up of human consciousness. It's actually hard work to keep it down. And so we've got Codex Alimentaris coming in. So it's going to stop us getting proper food. That's been described already at the weekend. And then just to make sure we can't get vitamins and supplements to make up for that, they're going to take that away from us too. The additives are loss of excitotoxins, damaging nerve cells. Fluoride targets the pineal gland. Then we've got the supposedly illegal drugs, which are actually being peddled by governments. They're the ones that will cause us damage. They might make people feel good for one night, but they're going to cause damage long term. Meanwhile, the shamanic plants, the medicine plants, are being gradually taken away. I found it very interesting that magic mushrooms are taken away. They contain psilocybin, which gives a very similar effect to DMT, which is something, a neurotransmitter we should have, and because it's molecularly very, very similar. So I just think that, and how much damage, how much crime is caused by people on magic mushrooms. I think it's very significant that they wanted to outlaw, and it's just ridiculous. Depleted uranium, very, very dangerous. That goes through the blood-brain barrier. We're told there's this blood-brain barrier, and all these substances aren't really going to go in there. Well, it's a lie. Vaccinations inflame the back of the brain and cause the myelin sheath around the nerves to be damaged. Chemtrails seems to be linked to the HEART project, so that electromagnetic radiation can be beamed into the sky, and the chemtrails create electromagnetic charge around the Earth, so that can be used to manipulate us. And then there's obvious things like the noise pollution, so we're just never being allowed to completely connect. We're just sort of off with the birds, or in my case, bird song, and then car alarms, so we're always being jolted out of it. And then TV, just don't get me started. I mean, the worst thing to me is that it keeps us in a passive state and just being fed whatever we're fed and not doing anything. A lot you can say about it, about the misinformation, about how it subverts our natural desires into and links them with unnatural desires. You linking, obviously, being there's obvious things that we know, that we're just linking happiness with material goods. But to me, it's the way it's making us just something that sits inactively in front of a box and disempowers us in that way. And the so-called education, that's kind of the thing, don't get me started. It's just increasingly becoming a programming machine. And now they've got to get a curriculum on children at 3, because if you allow a child to just be off in its daydreams and playing happily till it's 5, I think it will have the child's going to have a conscious memory of that, of what it feels like to be doing its own thing in its own space. And it seems like it's almost too dangerous for us to know. And we're kept disconnected from nature, which gives us that sense of connection to something beyond this limited state of consciousness. And that's been eroded constantly. I'm going to have to race through this, right? So obviously we need to improve our diet and lifestyles. But the main thing is to actually do it. People talk about it forever, but if you do it, it's really something else. Obviously, it's crucial for children, and children need to stop being sidelined and need to be prioritised. We need 22 amino acids, 8 of them are essential. The neurotransmitters in our brains are made of amino acids, which is protein. I mean, I tend to recommend people have some sort of protein 3 times a day to keep neurotransmitter levels up. Protein is being sort of underrated, I think. We need the fatty acids. Most of the people are deficient in omega-3. If you want to know more about this information, just come to Hughes and my workshop, because I'm not going to be able to explain everything here. Or we'll be around in the afternoon down in around here or down in Seven Stars if anyone wants to know more. And we need to eat about 80% of our food alkaline. The main alkaline foods are green vegetables. There are some others as well. So we need lots of greens. And we need to eat slow sugar-release foods, i.e. we don't want refined carbohydrates and sugar. And eat from the wild. This is one of my controversial statements. All wild food in its natural state is psychoactive, i.e. it activates the brain. Food is supposed to activate our brains. It's not supposed to be dead. It makes us feel more alive. That wild food has this strength and independence, completely different chemistry. And of course, that's been taken away from us with development. But eat it while we can and try and protect it. We eat a diet based on fruit as wide a variety as possible, including tropical fruit, nuts and seeds, a wider variety as possible, mainly soaked. Unsoaked, they contain phytic acid, which is to stop the seeds germinating before they got a steady supply of water, but that's an anti-nutrient. Another reason grains are an anti-nutrient, because until a grain is a seed, until a seed is soaked for a few hours in water, it has phytic acid in it, which is an anti-nutrient. Flax oil to give us the balance of omega-3. We eat a small amount of animal produce. We found that was necessary. A lot of raw foodists try to manage with that, and I see ones who do it, especially it works better in warmer climates. Good, that's fantastic. That's all I can say. That's great. But for a lot of us, a small amount of animal, we use raw dairy products, and it seems to make all the difference. Superfoods and supplements, because our soil is still so damaged, we still need help. Likely deficiencies that most of us have. Most of us will be deficient in zinc because of the state of the soil, and magnesium and iron. Vitamins, vitamin D, because we've been sold this story about not going in the sun, and because it'll give us cancer. Actually, we need sun to make vitamin D, and vitamin D helps stop cancer, so it's the other way around. We don't get UVB light in the winter months in this country, another thing we don't get told, so we can't actually manufacture vitamin D from the sun in the winter months. So I think this is probably where sort of the animal products come more in this country. So I mean, I personally go for sun showers, but you can get it from dairy products and fish and egg yolks. Tryptophan, on a cooked food diet with too low in tryptophan, cooking destroys tryptophan more than the other amino acids. And in an experimental situation, if you give people the 8 amino acids but too low in tryptophan, you will induce depression. You don't have to change life circumstances. Reduce the tryptophan, people get depressed because tryptophan makes serotonin in the brain. With raw, it's not such an issue because you're not getting tryptophan so damaged, but also we make kefir, which is a type of yogurt which is very rich in tryptophan. Right, okay. Right. Yeah, I will do. Right, I'm going to say one more thing, and I think something I've noticed with people is the resistance. And people will do anything, go to extraordinary lengths to improve how they feel, and do all sorts of activities, but they'll do anything as long as it doesn't work. And I sort of thought about this over the years, and I realised that when you start to reconnect your feelings, at first it can be extraordinarily painful because we're living in a way that's so damaging to us at first. When we feel that, it doesn't feel very nice, but if we stick with that, we will change. And it strengthens our attachments to ideas and beliefs that have served us, and we're frightened to lose because in our left brain state, we're so reliant on running things by ideas. And it's challenging at a very fundamental level what we are and how we've led our lives. We actually got to shift energetically. It's not enough to change our opinions. And I'm not trying to sell another belief system. I think we just have to try things, and if they feel right to us. And that we've been taught that not to trust our feelings. We've been taught that our feelings are selfish and dangerous, but actually our feelings connect us to everything else. And fundamentally, our feelings are unselfish. And that the deepest desire is to live in harmony with everything on this earth. And that anything in that state, anything is possible. That we are potentially multidimensional beings. That we can make choices, but eventually I think we can get to the point where ideas of timelines will completely change, that the past is changeable and the future is changeable, and all the laws of the universe are we can move to different ones, but I don't understand that. I just have a sense that as we shift our consciousness, that will become possible. And I'll finish there.
Ladies and gentlemen, Holly Paige.